really do appreciate you taking the time to talk about this with us. What we're trying to do, just to make sure you understand, is to create um, a repository of interviews and information about notable Black business persons, entrepreneurs, whose stories are sometimes known, but not in the way they need to be known. We want to make, Black business people, put them on a par with entertainers and athletes, because when you really understand what they've done, when we as a community better understand what they've contributed to our lives beyond entertainment, jobs, you know, houses, the kinds of things that really are critical and crucial to life. We just want to make sure that people understand that those things are not possible without somebody doing business. And so I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Well, it's funny.
Um,
Two quick things. I was telling Marion Brooks this. I was watching Channel 5, and Black History Month. They had this. They kept showing this picture of all these Black heroes, to celebrate Black History Month, and it was people you would think, Ida B. Wells and Lewis and Dr. King, and you went through the whole list. I think Oprah was there. There was great athletes, great entertainers, and great political leaders, but not one business person.
and that's a problem.
Like
That's
20,
a problem.
right?
That's a problem, John. I mean, it really is, because what it demonstrates is the disconnect between understanding what's really vital to your quality of life and your understanding about how to live a better life, and things that are, important, I guess, in the moment, but they certainly don't necessarily contribute to your quality of life overall, in terms of being able to get you a better house, a better car, a better school for your kids. None of that. None of that. So I know that you understand that very well, more better than most. But what I did know, when I was doing my research for this, what really kind of got to me, I didn't realize you came from three generations of lawyers.
Yeah.
Three generations. I knew your mom, and I knew about your grandfather, C.F. Stradford, but I did not know that JB was also a lawyer. That's a lot of pressure, bro.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure. I don't know how you avoided law school.
Well, it's funny. I have one stepfather was a lawyer also, and one ex-wife was a lawyer too. So
Oh my goodness.
it's
You're
around.
surrounded. You're surrounded. So I don't know. So obviously I related very much to JB Stratford's story in terms of him being a lawyer, entrepreneur, and a darn good one at that. I mean, he was the man. He was the man. What I'd like to know, because again, what we want to communicate to people through these interviews is the stories of how people have overcome all kinds of adversity, and how to build businesses and communities, and then how that has informed their project. I mean, their progeny, their families, and communities, as relates to how they can overcome some of the same obstacles, even though it's 150 years later or whatever, uh, in order to strive to be successful. Because nobody handed anybody this stuff on a silver platter. This is work. This is hard work. But there can be success at the end of, the proverbial rainbow. So if you could just address a little bit about how you heard about your great grandfather and grandfather growing up, and how that kind of impacted your life and your decision to be an entrepreneur.
Well, thank you. I learned a lot about the great work of my grandfather and my great grandfather from my mom, as you would expect. And she often talked about the fact that she was inspired to be a lawyer and to be the first African American woman to graduate from the University of Chicago Law School in 1946, because she saw her dad, C.F. Stradford, use his legal skills to stop Tulsa from extraditing my great grandfather back to Tulsa after the race massacre.
Mm,
Yeah, there was a real risk that if he had after he was indicted, if he had had to go back to Tulsa, that he possibly would have had a life sentence or would have been lynched. So my mom would always say, to watch her father use his legal skills to save her grandfather's life, you know, pushed her and inspired her to be a lawyer.
wow.
And
Wow.
And then for me to learn that entrepreneurship is in our blood, just
Right.
learned that my great grandfather had the largest black owned hotel in the country. And that not only did he have this great hotel, but he worked with other black businesses to construct the hotel and to market the hotel. And for all the services and needs, he used other black entrepreneurs to support that institution. And then he was outspoken about all the Jim Crow rules and laws and being forced to sit on the back of the train, etc. He was an outspoken fighter for our community. So it was, I've learned to appreciate the legacy that he left the family. That is, it's not a surprise that my grandfather CF started the first black bar associations in the country and fought against restrictive covenants for the famous Hansberry versus Lee Supreme Court fight. Uh,
Hmm.
and then to watch my mom's pioneer efforts, it does go back to that legacy that JB left.
Well, what I can say personally, because I have known you, you've been a very good friend to me and to my family, um, is that it did more than just kind of, you know, inform your perspective. I mean, obviously, you took this very seriously because I know quite a few business people, fortunately. And I can honestly say that I know hardly any who have been as committed, as dedicated to trying to make sure that you paid it forward. I mean, your willingness to challenge um, the status quo, all the same time that you've had to navigate getting business from some of these folks, you have had to walk the tightrope of trying to advocate to make sure that boardrooms look more like America, that professional services were being purchased at a rate that was consistent with the kind of breakdown of the American demographics. You have really devoted your life, John, to fairness, diversity, um, you know, and making sure that we could fix what's wrong with our community from within. Um, and it's cost you. I know it's cost you. But you never talk about that. And I don't know if you're comfortable because that wasn't on the list of questions I gave you. But organically, I mean, I think it's important that people understand that you've had to sacrifice. It has cost you big money to be an advocate. You've been kicked off boards for being an advocate. I mean, people don't know that.
Well, there's a lot there, I think, and as you know, you come from an extraordinary family that was committed for rights and improving the lives of African Americans in this country. And I grew up in a situation where when I was a young person, I can remember sneaking downstairs and watching Reverend Jackson hold court in
Hmm.
my mom's living room. You know,
Wow.
and to be able to be close up and see that kind of leadership. And then, of course, I couldn't help but mention, my primary role model, who so well, George Johnson, who created Johnson Products with Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen hair care products. But he started Independence Bank, the largest black bank in the country. He started Soul Train with Don Cornelius. He paid for years of advertising in Essence in advance to keep Essence alive when they were having trouble making payroll.
Mm.
Burrell Advertising, they became the largest black ad agency in the country. And at the Urban League, he was responsible for 50 tables every year at their Golden Fellowship Gala. You know,
Wow.
and of course, finally, when Dr. King came to Chicago, desperate to make payroll, Reverend Jackson often tells the story that George Johnson not only got Independence Bank, the bank that he created to back loans that Dr. King desperately needed, but he also rounded up all the other African American entrepreneurs. And Dr. King, as he was leaving Chicago, was just overwrought with emotion. He could not believe what the black community had been able to come together and make this difference at a key time in the SDLC's history and an important time in the movement. So to be around those kind of people early in my life, like Reverend Jackson, like George Johnson, my mom and my dad and others, it just didn't make sense that you would get into the corporate world and forget all those roots.
Mm.
forget about the lessons those giants taught us. And one of the things that my father always taught me, who was, he was an original Tuskegee Airman and flew over 100 missions. He pounded home to me that you have to live up to the commitments that you make to others. And so many of these institutions where I was on the board, they're making these publicized commitments to our community, promising to work with black businesses and hire black senior executives. And it just was morally wrong to me to not speak out and speak up when you saw they weren't living the values that they said they cared about.
Right.
So, you'd sit in these boardrooms, all the investment bankers would come in for a deal, the lawyers, the accountants, the consultants, the ad agencies, public relations firms, the government, and they'd all be white men. And someone had to raise their hand and say, this is just not right, and follow Lewis's footsteps and try to make good trouble when you're in that boardroom,
Right.
not just make all the white leadership comfortable.
Right. Well, you've done it, and you've done it very well. Um, as the managing member of DX Capital Partners that is that has bought the controlling interest in the Dream Exchange, which we really hope to come online this year. I am absolutely committed to the kind of work that will build the infrastructure to create a pipeline for entrepreneurs and businesses in our community to be able to access the public capital markets. Critical to that is creating accessible educational training for people no matter where in the journey they are. With Ariel Academy, you have created, and I don't know how many people really know this, but you have created a wonderful school replete with all kinds of curriculum, everything you need to educate our youngest about money, about how to make it legally, how to save it, how to deploy it in ways that are intelligent and will help them live a better quality of life. I'd like to talk a little bit about what inspired you to do that and how you feel, because frankly, I want to use that as a model for our youngest people and the youngest folks in our community. Um, but I would like to know how you feel about the way that that mission or that effort has uh, helped the people, the young people that have gone through the school, but also how we could take it and expand it and scale it
Mm-hmm.
to be a national model that not only would have its own schools, but inform and elevate the significance of this kind of financial literacy training in all the public schools and private schools for that matter.
Well,
Is that something that you think is plausible? It's certainly necessary, but is it plausible?
I think it's plausible, and just it's a lot there, and just the quick history of the Ariel Community Academy is a public school. It's 25 years, a little over 25 years old, um, 46th in Greenwood, which is interesting because I grew up on Greenwood Avenue, and the Greenwood District. And
Oh wow! I lived on Greenwood too, 1155 Greenwood in Memphis. Believe it or not,
wow,
is
yeah,
that deep?
interesting. When I start with the Greenwood part, is that President Obama and Michelle, of course, they bought a home at 51st in Greenwood.
That's right.
Very well aware of the Ariel Community Academy just 5 blocks away. So when President Obama was president, he asked me to chair a task force, a council on financial capability for young Americans.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Great thing, and there was the Treasury Secretary was ex officio, the Education Secretary was ex officio, the head of the CFPB. We had some city treasurers and business leaders and CEOs all on this council that I was chairing. And at the end of the day, just getting to the last part of your point, we we reported out to President Obama that we thought that this should be a model for how financial services companies could partner with urban public schools. What we had done at the Ariel Community Academy, and the key
Hmm.
themes of the Ariel Community Academy. One you mentioned, we've created a financial literacy curriculum that we share with anyone for these young people K through 8th grade. And we're teaching the kids about scarcity and the magic of compound interest, and we're teaching them about the stock market. teaching them about entrepreneurship, thinking all the things they need to be able to be comfortable with the markets when they leave the Ariel Community Academy. To enhance the curriculum, we've over the years tried to expose them to as many different situations that make sense as possible. So we've had guest speakers come to the school. Many people that you know have been there. It's from people, state treasurer, our city treasurer, um, founder of Morningstar, the extraordinary business in Chicago. To every year, we used to take for a number of years. We used to take 40 kids to the McDonald's annual meeting each year,
Hmm.
and they would have a chance to participate in a public annual meeting
Oh, wow.
question. And after the meeting was over at McDonald's, they would go spend an hour with Don Thompson, who had been president and CEO of McDonald's, along with the chairman of the board, Andy McKenna. And after their hour learning about how Don had become the first African American CEO of a company of that scale in our country's history, then they would go get a tour of Hamburger University and see the whole place. It was a great model that we had.
Wow.
Don was in charge there. But at the heart of it is the program that we borrowed from my dad's concept, because my dad used to buy stocks for me every birthday and every Christmas after I was 12 instead of toys. So what we did was every first grade class got a $20,000 class gift, and we would manage it for the first 6 years or so, and they would see the stocks that we were buying in our Ariel mutual funds. They would come down to our offices and learn how we were doing research and how we pick stocks. We go down to the school and talk to them about how we do our homework and how we do our research. And then in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, the kids would start to buy real stocks with real money.
Hmm.
And the idea has been that when the kids graduate in eighth grade, they take $20,000 and they give it back to the next first grade class. So it's become a self perpetuating program. They take a portion of the profits and get a class gift back to the school. Maybe a better sound system for the gym. A better technology for their investment room. Whatever the school needs, and then whatever's left over, the kids divide it among themselves. And if they agree to put it into a 529 program, we match it with $500. And the idea is, matching is so important later in your life when you have your first 401k plan,
Right.
have you. But the idea of having kids making real decisions with real money, we think helps enhance the learning. And what also has been great, by them getting to know us, and Melody Hobson and I are down at the school. We got to get down there more and more. But then they start to think about financial services careers themselves.
Right.
So much of the wealth today is created in financial services and professional
Right.
and technology. So getting exposed to the financial services industry, we think it's really great for these young people to see people that look like them doing what we do for a living. And it's been 25 years. Arnie Duncan and his sister Sarah helped create the school. It was their idea. Of course, Arnie wanted to be a school superintendent in Chicago and to be the Secretary of Education. So he kind of had his launch after he created the Ariel Community Academy, and it helped him along with his career. And today, one of our graduates, Miles Gage, has created a company called Rapunzel, that is a program that's teaching young people about the stock market and investing. So he's paying it forward.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's
That's
all.
great. I love that. I love that.
So,
Well, that's that. I mean, just imagine if everybody or 10% of the people out here were really, really making that kind of commitment, because that's a real commitment. I mean, 25 years of really helping expose. I wish we could just kind of figure out how, track those lives of those students that have been through that academy and compare the quality of their lives and what they're pursuing versus other kids from the South Side who are in schools where this kind of stuff is just not taught, which is the overwhelming majority of the schools. Because, I mean, at some point, I think that kind of data has to be gathered in order to really drive policy in a way that's going to make the difference. And that's hopefully what with the Dream Exchange we'll be able to, the kind of thing we'll be able to do, um, operating at a level that will allow us to really drive a lot of revenue, a lot of resources to that kind of, scaling. Because again, there are a lot of good programs out here. I don't know, they're a lot like Ariel, but there are a lot of good financial literacy programs out here. I just came across something called Every Income, which is a very robust financial literacy training program that was created by a brother from Ethiopia, and great graphics. I mean, it's really very accessible to people, and no matter where you are in your journey, if you're not, if you're just trying to find out about money, you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, you want to just get good information. Really, really good stuff. So there's good stuff out there. We just have to find a way. And you probably are aware of MoneyThink, which is now become part of the University of Chicago. Um, that's a great program for teaching kids, who are older than the kids at Ariel. That's more, I guess, geared more toward high school students. But you know, finding ways to really attract resources and devote resources to the expansion of those programs is very critical to me, and something I care a lot about. So I see our time is getting a little short. So what I want to do is see if you can help. When you think about the circumstances that existed when your great grandfather was building his empire, despite those challenges. In a sense, I think there's more opportunity now than there ever has been for finding success in business in America for people of color. What advice would you give a young person coming out of college about pursuing a career in finance, or getting a job that's going to lead to the kind of knowledge that would allow them to be an entrepreneur? I mean, are you hopeful? What do you think?
Well, I would say a couple of things. I mean, the fact first, that there is some hope after the extraordinary tragedy of George Floyd. His murder was so horrific that there are a lot more people looking and willing to think about doing things the right way, creating more opportunities for us to participate fully in our capitalist democracy. Our civic committee in Chicago has got a great new program. They've got Jim Lowry, who's hired to coordinate the program. I know you know Jim well.
Yeah.
So that was, he just getting going with it, but it's going to be really special. There's a progress. We're starting more and more to use the term business diversity instead of supplier diversity, which is something the University of Chicago coined.
Oh, good.
The idea that we should be allowed to do business in everything that an anchor institution spends money on. Not just construction and catering are important; they provide important jobs. But all the data shows the wealth and jobs come in professional services, financial services, and technology.
Right.
Not even a close call. And data that shows in Chicago, the top spend in Chicagoland is $75 billion with professional and financial services, 25 billion with construction.
Mm.
Construction has profit margins of 0 to 0.5%,
Whoa.
while the professional services has profit margins 5 to 20%. So we're starting to get people to realize we can be included in that part of the wealth building part of our economy, and that it is a modern day Jim Crow if you only let the black and the brown people do the catering and the construction. You let the white guys do the technology and the rest.
Right.
So I'm more and more optimistic that slowly but surely some change and some shift happening with that. And you've got some models who are doing things the right way, places that you know well, not only the University of Chicago, but Exelon, McDonald's, have been really leading the way in these areas. Northern Trust has been doing more and more, and Knight Foundation in Miami, et cetera. There's just a lot of great role models of progress. But the data right now still is really troubling. The dean of Yale's business school, Irwin Charles, is an African American who says that relative to white Americans, we're worse off today than our grandparents were.
Wow.
We are much worse off. And finally, if you're from Chicago, we lost all the large black businesses. They're gone. And we have 3 or 4 of the top 150 privately held companies in Chicago. Now we're 0 of the top 150. So we are really in a bad, bad, bad place. But we're, I think, starting to have some hope. And unfortunately, it took the tragic death of George Floyd to force people to think about the fact that economic opportunity is important for us, and that all the challenges that we face are tied to wealth. Our poor housing, our poor healthcare, our poor educations are tied to this huge wealth divide in this country that just continues to get worse and worse. So we've all got to fight together to force these anchor institutions to include us with everything they spend money on. And it's just We've got to get into the modern age. The final thing is I tell the young people at the Ariel Community Academy, and I tell the folks at the University of Chicago where I mentor there, we've created a program for UFC students to uh, work in the get paid internships to work in the investment offices of major endowments.
Mm,
We need, as young people, as entrepreneurs, to learn about these fields where the wealth's created.
right.
And if you're in an endowment office, you're going to learn about hedge funds, you're going to learn about private equity, you're going to learn about venture capital. And many of us in our community had no exposure to that world because of the historic discrimination we face in this country. So I just think it's so important that when we talk to young people, we tell them, the people in private equity, are the wealthiest people in our country. Our wealthiest person in Illinois, Ken Griffin, well, by far the wealthiest, worth tens of billions of dollars, is in hedge funds. You know, he has controls more philanthropy and political empowerment than the rest. We want to have African Americans having the same chance to do that. So we've got to get doors opened in these parts of the economy again, where the wealth's being created today and tomorrow.
Okay. Well, that was very even-handed. So we're not left despondent, even though the numbers are clearly providing a basis for despondency. Um, I agree. I think that there is hope. I think that there is a generation of young people who have been exposed to some of these jobs and who, are founders and finding their way to to capital and to trying to make capital available to others so they can pay it forward. I think there's probably a bigger community like that than there's ever been. Um, but I think your programs, the programs you've described, you know, are going to have to be scaled. And I just wanted, do you find yourself um, kind of on an island when it comes, John, to really having people that understand the importance of this work going forward? There are some successful business people in Chicago that we all know very pretty well, and I just wonder because when I look at initiatives like this, I know everybody's doing something. People have their own pet charities and pet projects, but honestly, I mean, I don't know anybody who comes anywhere near you when it comes to the breadth of your work to mentor, to provide tangible avenues for um, growth and education and exposure. I just wonder how much more effective we could be at this if we could grow a larger contingency of people who really, really understood that.
Well, as you know, you're asking all the right questions, Dwayne, and at Ariel, we try not to just, as a friend of mine said, just don't admire the problem, but try to have.
Right.
So, Charles Tribbett well. Uh,
Yes.
19 years ago, we created our Black Corporate Directors Conference. Started with 30 African Americans that are on corporate boards. And now, this last year before COVID, we had over 200 directors come together for 3 days.
Wow.
And the whole concept has been from the beginning that I had this hypothesis that Charles agreed with was that we were getting into these corporate boardrooms and not fighting for economic fairness once we were in the boardroom.
Right.
You were happy to be there, collect the checks, and not make good trouble.
Right.
So the idea was when we brought each other together, we would learn from each other how to be leaders in the boardroom and how to lead on the economic justice and civil rights issues once you're in that boardroom. And every year at the conference, we have what we call the conscience of the conference, typically on Friday night speak.
Hmm.
And in the early years, we had people who actually marched with Dr. King. Harry Belafonte came, fired everybody. Andy Young, Reverend Jackson. Uh, we had Congressman Clyburn, Congressman Lewis. Uh,
Hmm.
some of the best moments of these iconic people coming and spending a couple of days with us and talking about the responsibility that all of us have to stand on the shoulders of those leaders and the work of Dr. King and others. And that's why we call it the conscience of the conference. As the years have gone on, we've had Barack Obama speak and Valerie Jarrett speak, and we've had Reverend Sharpton speak, and just many, many other dynamic leaders, people head up the Urban League, and Mark Morial, NAACP, etc. But every year, hopefully, a few people get religion and realize back home they're going to start measuring how the money's being spent, how much is going to black businesses, and look at the top executive suites and see how many black people are in the C-suite, the
Right.
CFO, general counsel, etc. And hopefully, every year we bring a couple more people, into this sort of belief system. But it's hard, and
Yeah.
it's several times, but it's uncomfortable to make people uncomfortable.
Right.
But if we don't speak up, who will?
It's not their job. It's not what they know. So for us to expect them to take leadership in this regard is just folly. I mean, there's no way that you're going to get people who don't really understand the problems to
Right.
take responsibility for fixing the problem. But there have to be ways for us to find, you know, to create an ecosystem that supports people who want to do the right thing. I'm talking about our people now
Right.
who are sitting in these boardrooms and rewards them for doing it. So we're contemplating that the Dream Exchange is going to have some kind of awards program that really allows us to nationalize and popularize, if you will, the notion that there are people doing this kind of thing. Now, we may not get a huge audience initially, but I think it's something that we're going to be committed to that will really recognize people for these things. The Essence Awards used to be kind of like that for people, not necessarily in business, but people who were doing things that were important and who don't generally get recognized in a large scale manner. But I think that could really provide some impetus because it also gives a chance to tell some stories that don't get told. And what I'm hoping is that they will be stories that will inspire corp non-black corporate board members who
Mhm.
will watch the show and say, "Oh, okay, well, I never thought about it quite that way. This is a bigger problem than just us, and maybe we can get on board with making some changes so that the job isn't quite as hard when you're by yourself and you haven't, had the benefit of growing up like you or me, where this was just expected. I mean, it's what you did. It's what you did.
I was going to say, there are some people who've come along and are doing great work. And conference, I think they've really enjoyed the conference. People like Bruce Gordon, who ran the NAACP, and Jay
Mm,
Bell, who's on the Apple board, and Neelan Youngblood, who's been on boards. And I could go down the list. Les Coney and a handful of others. It's hard to go down the list. Melody Hobson, of course, our co-CEO, is impacted.
right. Who's just doing wonderful, wonderful things. I mean, I am so proud of her. I remember when she came in there. Well, we were all kind of young then. I was going to say a whippersnapper. We were all whippersnappers, but to see her to grow into the role where she is not only been very effective at her job, but I mean, really, really has gotten the gospel, and she's out there. She is, preaching it as well as anyone. I mean, at some very high levels, and I'm just really, really proud of her. So, I mean, that's you just have a heck of a I wanted to have this conversation about your great grandfather because I think it's important for us to draw the line so that people can see this comes from someplace more often than not. And one of the things that amazes me is your great grandfather got his law degree from Indiana, the home of the Ku Klux Klan. How did that happen? I mean, good grief!
No,
It was about the time when the Klan was getting started.
they actually had me come and I did it over Zoom, but the Indiana Alumni Association had me speak, and they wanted to have a representative of the family there for some kind of celebration of my grandfather's connection to Indiana Law School.
It's amazing, amazing. So, any closing comments you want to inspire us with? Again, we really appreciate the time and your insights. And I gotta, in this new role that I have, I'm gonna have to um, get myself on the invitation list for this corporate board thing because I will have my own board now, and we'll be doing all that. But that sounds like a place to be. When do you guys normally have that
We
event?
usually, I like to make it easy to remember, so it's the first weekend after Labor Day, and
Okay,
appreciate it. This year, and we're hoping that George Johnson will come. You know, he's in his early 90s and moving toward mid 90s. He's still as sharp as a tack, and
he is.
stories and history of what he's created. We're just really looking forward to him being there to inspire another generation.
I'm hoping to interview him. I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago. He was very gracious, and he's working on a book.
Right.
So, which is wonderful because it's so long overdue. But he's working on a book, so we just want to make sure that the questions I'm asking in the interview doesn't really undercut anything they're trying to do with the book. But I couldn't believe how. I mean, he is hardly missing a beat here. He's just as vital and active and sharp as he has ever been. So it's so good to see that, because he's been through a lot. He's been through a lot, and he's helped a lot of people. So thank you so much, John. We
Great.
really appreciate the time. And next time we come, we're just going to talk about John.
Okay, well, this is really fun.
Okay. Thank you much. Appreciate you.